Hello, you're on the Reddit Reveals channel. There was a suitcase on my bed when I came home. Not mine. It was hers. I hadn't seen her in months. I hadn't heard her voice since the night she whispered, "Don't follow me," and walked barefoot into a car that wasn't ours. And now her suitcase was sitting on my side of the bed like it never left. I stood in the doorway for a long time, holding a plastic bag full of cat litter and frozen pizza, trying to make sense of it. My brain refused to believe it. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe I was dead. Maybe this was some cruel cosmic prank and Ashton Kutcher was about to jump out of my closet with a camera crew. But then I heard the shower running. I dropped the groceries. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked back to my car, or straight into the woods and never returned. But instead, I walked through the hallway like a zombie. Each step felt wrong, like the floorboards were trying to warn me. The bathroom door was slightly open. Steam poured out like a horror movie. And there she was, Tessa, standing under the water like nothing happened. Like she hadn't torn our marriage in half with one voicemail. Like she hadn't moved to another state to be with someone else. Like she belonged here. When she saw me, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just said, "Can we pretend I never left, just for tonight?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was so overwhelmed I nearly vomited in the sink. Instead, I just nodded. Like a coward. She stepped out of the shower, wrapped herself in my towel, the blue one I always told her not to use, and walked past me like a ghost who still paid rent here. I slept on the couch that night. She didn't say another word. I didn't sleep. And in the morning, she was making pancakes. My favorite. She was humming. She was wearing the hoodie I threw away 2 months ago. It was like she rewound my life without asking. And I wanted answers. I wanted to scream. But all I said was, "Why are you here?" She flipped a pancake, smiled softly, and said something that made my stomach turn to glass. "Because he told me the truth. And now you deserve to know it, too." I hadn't even processed the he before she slid a folded envelope across the counter. My name was on it. Inside, not a love letter, not an apology, not even a goodbye, just one single photo. And that was the exact second my entire reality began to fall apart. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the photo. It wasn't old, like I had expected. It wasn't something nostalgic or sentimental. It was recent. Very recent. The timestamp in the bottom corner said 4:17 a.m., and it was dated 2 nights ago. It showed Tessa sleeping in the front seat of a car, curled up like a child, parked at a gas station I recognized immediately. It was less than 10 minutes from our old apartment. The photo had clearly been taken through the windshield, from the outside. Whoever took it had gotten uncomfortably close. I looked up at her, holding the photo like it was contaminated. "Who took this?" I asked, but my voice came out like a whisper soaked in panic. She didn't answer at first. She just kept flipping pancakes like she was on autopilot, like this was a normal Tuesday morning, and we were still a normal married couple who didn't have ghosts hiding in the walls. "Tessa," I said again, louder this time. "Who took the picture?" She finally turned around. Her expression wasn't scared. It was resigned, like she'd already made peace with something that was about to drag me under. "He did," she said softly. "Caleb." I didn't recognize the name. I thought I was supposed to, but I didn't. She saw the confusion on my face and clarified before I could ask. "The man I left you for." Oh, so that was his name. Somehow, knowing it made things worse. It made it real. Until now, he had just been a faceless villain in my head, a shadowy figure that ruined everything and got away with it. Now he had a name. Caleb. It sounded too calm, too soft for someone who dismantled an entire marriage. I dropped the photo on the table. "Why is he taking pictures of you sleeping in gas stations?" She poured syrup on a plate that neither of us would eat. "Because I left him," she said. "Because I found something I wasn't supposed to." Then she slid another envelope across the counter. This one was thicker, unsealed. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were 6 more photos. One showed Caleb standing in a hallway I recognized. It was from my office building. Another showed him parked outside my mother's house. A third was blurry, but it showed me, at the grocery store, putting frozen peas into a shopping cart. He'd been watching me. Tessa wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring out the window, like she was trying to spot him hiding behind the bushes. "I think he was trying to scare me at first," she said. "But then it got worse." "How worse?" I asked. She didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a flash drive. She placed it on the table between us like it was a weapon. There's a video on this, she said. You're not going to want to watch it. But you have to. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection blinked back at me in its metallic surface. You think I betrayed you, she continued. But I swear, Sylas, I didn't know what I was walking into. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. And I realized, for the first time since she returned, that maybe this wasn't a story about love or even betrayal. Maybe it was about something much, much darker. I sat there staring at the flash drive for what felt like hours, even though it was probably just a few minutes. I didn't want to touch it. It felt radioactive. Like the moment I plugged it in, something would detonate. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, mentally. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to find out what was on that drive. I wasn't ready to confirm the worst or worse. Find something I didn't even know I should be afraid of. But Tessa just sat there across from me, quiet. Her eyes focused on the table like she was at a funeral and I was the one in the casket. Where did this come from? I asked her, still not reaching for it. My hand hovered above it like I was waiting for permission from some invisible force. She didn't blink. I found it in Caleb's car, she said, hidden behind the dashboard. It was taped inside. I blinked. What were you doing in his car? She paused. Running. That was all she gave me. And suddenly, it hit me. She looked exhausted. Not just tired, drained. Her skin had a sickly tone, and her wrists looked thinner than I remembered. This wasn't just emotional guilt anymore. She looked like someone who had been through something physically traumatic. My stomach turned with a sudden pulse of guilt. I had been so focused on what she did to me, I hadn't stopped to think. Maybe something had been done to her too. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The folder only had one file. No name, no extension, just a string of random numbers. I opened it with VLC, and the screen turned black. For a second, I thought it was broken. But then the image sharpened. It was night. A dim parking lot. Grainy footage from what looked like a dashboard cam. There was a woman in the frame. It was Tessa. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Caleb's car, looking out the window. Caleb was in the driver's seat, talking. I couldn't hear the audio, just low static. But she was shaking her head, clearly distressed. She tried opening the door. He reached across, slowly, and closed it again. Then he locked it. I gripped the edge of the table. On screen, Caleb leaned in close to her face. He wasn't yelling, but he was saying something with intensity. Her eyes were wide, not in fear, exactly, but confusion, like she'd just realized something she couldn't unrealize. The video jumped, skipped ahead. Tessa was crying now. Not loud, just that quiet, hopeless kind of crying that makes you feel like you're watching someone drown silently. Another jump. Tessa was now in the back seat. Alone. Caleb was nowhere in the frame. But in the corner, I could just barely make out something that made my heart nearly stop. A photograph, taped to the back window. It was me, from behind, walking into my building. The video ended. Just like that. I turned to Tessa, completely numb. What is this? I asked. She stared at me and said, That's the night I realized Caleb wasn't just using me. He was watching you. The entire time. Since before we ever left town. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room and bury my head in the wall. Instead, I sat there in stunned silence, feeling something cold creep down my spine. Tessa leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Sylas, I don't think he ever wanted me. I think I was just the easiest way to get to you. And in that moment, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. A voicemail, one I received months before Tessa left me. A wrong number, I thought. A deep voice, distorted, saying, You're not as invisible as you think. I deleted it back then, thinking it was a prank. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Not even for a minute. I laid on the couch with the TV on mute, watching infomercials about hair regrowth and miracle frying pans, while Tessa slept in the room we used to share. The photo of me taped inside Caleb's car looped in my head like a horror film I never agreed to star in. His obsession, or whatever this was, it had started long before I knew his name. Long before Tessa ever left. And now, she was telling me he'd been watching me, tracking me, maybe even planning something darker than either of us wanted to admit. But the most terrifying part? I started to feel like I had seen this kind of thing before. Around 4:30 a.m., I got up and went digging through a box in the back of my hallway closet. Old bills, expired car insurance cards, mismatched socks, and then I found it. The storage key from my old apartment. When Tessa and I moved in together, I had a private storage unit in the basement of the building. I kept some junk there, high school yearbooks, broken electronics, and boxes I never unpacked after my dad passed. After we got married and moved into our house, I forgot about it. But in that moment, I remembered something strange I had come across years ago and dismissed. There had been a letter, no return address, just typed words and no signature. It had said, "You're not looking closely enough. The people around you wear better masks than you think." I thought it was spam. I tossed it in a box and never gave it another thought, until now. I didn't tell Tessa where I was going. I just said I needed air. She didn't ask questions. I think we both knew we were past the point of normal explanations. The roads were empty, the sky still dark, the kind of blue that feels like the world is holding its breath. I parked and walked down the long cement hallway to unit number 107. I hadn't been inside in over 6 years. It smelled like dust and old carpet. I flicked on the small overhead bulb and started digging through boxes until I found the envelope. It was still there, yellowed at the edges. The paper inside was stiff and brittle now. I read it again, the same cryptic message. But something was different this time. My eyes caught a faint mark at the bottom corner I'd never noticed before. Tiny initials, C.W. Caleb, right? I didn't know his last name. I never asked. But suddenly I had a reason to. I returned home and Tessa was in the kitchen again, this time just sipping water and staring at nothing. "Did you know Caleb's last name?" I asked. She blinked, surprised by how sudden I sounded. "Right," she said. "Why?" I showed her the letter. Her hands went cold when she touched it. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. I explained. About the storage unit. The envelope. How it came years ago, but made no sense at the time. She stared at the paper like it had bitten her. Then she said something I will never forget. "I saw this exact message on his wall once. Framed. He said it was from a book. But now..." She trailed off. I didn't need her to finish. Because now I knew. He'd been near me before she ever met him. This wasn't about her. She wasn't the beginning. I was. And suddenly, everything flipped. What if the betrayal wasn't hers? What if the entire relationship was part of his plan? What if she hadn't been taken from me, but sent to me? We didn't speak for hours after that. The letter stayed on the table between us, like it was radioactive. Every time I looked at it, I felt a sharp nausea crawl up my throat. I could tell Tessa was unraveling quietly, in her own way. She wasn't crying. That would have made her more human, more present. But she was staring off into nothing, blinking slowly like she was remembering things she never wanted to remember again. I made coffee just to do something with my hands. My brain was screaming at me to get answers, to demand them now, but my body was locked in this slow-motion trance. I couldn't force her to talk. I had tried that before, years ago, about things far less important, and it had never worked. So I sat there, sipping bitter coffee I forgot to sweeten, until finally, she spoke. "I met Caleb before I met you," she said, her voice like gravel underwater. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" She nodded slowly, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "Only once. Briefly. It wasn't anything. I didn't even know his name at the time. It was at that theater downtown. The Wexler. I knew it. I'd taken her there for our second anniversary." She continued. "I was waiting in the lobby for my friend, and he was sitting on the bench beside me. I remember him because he was sketching." She looked up at me, and I could tell she was bracing for something. "He was sketching you." The words didn't make sense at first. "What?" I whispered. "Me?" She nodded again. "You were standing by the ticket booth, talking to someone. I didn't know you yet, but he showed me the drawing. It looked like you." I remember saying, "He looks sad." And Caleb just smiled and said, "Exactly." The room spun a little. "That doesn't make sense," I muttered. "I didn't meet you until a year later." She was already nodding. "I know. That's what I'm saying. I didn't realize until recently that the man I left you for was the same man who showed me your face in a sketchpad before I knew your name." I stood up. I didn't mean to. My body just reacted like it was trying to escape the gravity of her words. My head was pounding. "So, what? Are you saying this was all planned? From the beginning? That he..." I choked on my own breath. "That he planted you?" "No," she shouted, and finally, some fire returned to her voice. "No, I wasn't part of anything. Not consciously. I swear to you. But now, looking back, Sylas, I think he was nudging everything. Quietly. Slowly. I think he made sure we crossed paths. I think he was pulling strings before we even knew there were strings." I walked to the sink and gripped the edge until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything in the kitchen just to feel something grounded. I thought I'd been betrayed by the person I loved, and that was painful enough. But now, the betrayal didn't feel personal anymore. It felt orchestrated, cold, like someone had written me into a play and I was only now discovering the script. How long did you live with him? I asked, my voice hollow. 3 months, she said. And you just now decided to leave? She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any words. I found something, she admitted. A room. In his house. He kept it locked, but he forgot one night. Or maybe he wanted me to find it. I turned slowly. What room? Her face was pale. There were pictures of you, lined up on a wall. Hundreds. Some of them from years ago, before I knew you, before we even met. You at coffee shops, at work, sleeping in the library. And then, her voice cracked. Then there were drawings. Detailed ones. You crying. You with blood on your hands. You with a gun in your mouth. My entire body turned to ice. And a calendar, she added, pinned in the middle of the wall. I couldn't speak. Tessa stepped toward me, voice trembling. Tomorrow's date was circled in red. I didn't sleep the rest of that night either. I just sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall like it might blink first. Tessa eventually drifted off on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to be in the same room with her anymore. Not because I hated her. That would have been easier. I wished I could hate her. But the truth was more painful. I still loved her, and that made everything more impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the wall she described. The drawings. The photos. The calendar. That red-circled date. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. It played on repeat in my head like a ticking clock. The kind of ticking you feel in your ribs, not your ears. I opened my phone and checked the calendar. The date was meaningless. Just a Tuesday. No holidays. No anniversaries. Just a normal, empty day. But now it had weight. Like a shadow waiting to stretch over everything. I called the police around 7 a.m. I didn't know what I was even reporting. A man had pictures of me, a creepy room, a circled calendar. It all sounded insane out loud. The woman on the other end of the line was polite but dismissive. Have you been physically threatened, sir? I said no. Do you have proof of illegal surveillance? I said no. She suggested I file a harassment report and speak to someone in person. Earliest available is Friday at 3:15. 3 days too late. When I hung up, my phone buzzed with a voicemail alert. No ring. Just the alert. I hadn't even noticed a call came through. I played it, and my entire body froze. It was a recording. Not a voice, at least, not speaking directly. It was a conversation. A muffled one. Someone breathing heavily. And then, he still doesn't get it. Another voice responded, low and amused. He will. After tomorrow. Click. I didn't recognize the voices. But something about the rhythm, the tone. One of them sounded like me. I dropped the phone like it burned. I didn't know what to do. My thoughts were crashing into each other. Could someone have faked my voice? Spliced it together? Deepfakes were a thing now. But who would do that? And more importantly, why? I ran to the living room, shaking Tessa awake. Did you give him anything of mine? Audio, videos, anything? She sat up, dazed and frightened. No, of course not. I never. I shoved the phone toward her. Then explained this. She listened to the message. Twice. And something in her face changed, like recognition, or worse, guilt. I've heard this before, she whispered. He used to play it. Like background noise. Over and over again. I never paid attention. But now, Sylas, I think he was conditioning me. Preparing me. Preparing you for what? I shouted. What the hell is he trying to do? I don't know. She snapped back, finally breaking. I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what's happening anymore. I paced the room like a wild animal. My skin was buzzing. My thoughts wouldn't hold still. Every shadow outside the window looked like it was watching me. I checked the locks. Twice. 3 times. I unplugged the internet. Turned off every light. Every camera. But it still felt like I was being watched. Because maybe I wasn't just being watched. Maybe I was being rewritten. Like my life had been edited, piece by piece, by someone who knew the script better than I ever did. I walked into the hallway, pulled the attic cord, and climbed into the crawl space. I needed space. Darkness. Isolation. I sat in the insulation and cried like a child. I don't even know how long I was up there. Hours. Minutes. Time didn't make sense anymore. And then I heard it. From below. A knock at the door. Not loud. Just steady. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then 3 more. And a voice. Muffled, but unmistakable. Sylas. It's me. I just want to talk. It was my voice. Calling from outside. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I crouched motionless in the attic crawl space, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape without me. The voice from outside repeated, clearer this time. Sylas. I just want to talk. You don't have to be scared. It was my voice. Not a copy. Not a vague impression. It was exactly how I sounded in the morning. That soft, exhausted rasp with too much regret in it. A voice I'd heard in voicemails, in mirrors, in my own head while trying to fall asleep. But now it was outside my door, asking to be let in. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Sweat soaked my back. Below me, the house remained still. I couldn't see anything from up here. I could only hear. The silence that followed the knock was worse than the voice. Because it meant he was waiting. Whoever, whatever, was out there didn't need to force anything. He had time. He always had time. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't new. He'd been circling my life like a vulture for years. This was just the first time I noticed him. Maybe because I'd finally pulled back the curtain. Or maybe because I'd reached the final scene, and this was the part where I got to see the audience. From somewhere below, the floor creaked. Not near the front door. Inside the house. I froze. I had locked the doors. I was sure of it. But locks are only protection if you're the only one with the key. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was Tessa. Maybe she'd gone to check the door. Maybe she was just walking around. But then I remembered something chilling. I hadn't seen or heard her since I ran up here. That had been over an hour ago. Tessa. I whispered down the attic hatch. Nothing. Just stale air and dust. I lowered myself carefully, landing barefoot in the hallway. The house was dark, the lights off just like I'd left them. But something was different. The smell. The air had changed. There was a scent I couldn't place, sharp, sterile, like antiseptic and electricity. And beneath it, the faintest hint of burning plastic. I called her name again. Tessa. Still nothing. I moved down the hall, into the living room. The couch was empty. But the front door? It was open. Just a crack. No sign of forced entry. No footprints. Just that whisper of a gap, like someone wanted me to know it had been opened. My mouth went dry. I backed away slowly, turning to head upstairs and grab my phone. That's when I saw the note on the wall. Not the table. The wall. Pinned with one of our old refrigerator magnets, written in thick red ink. This isn't the first version of you I've tried. My legs gave out. I dropped to the floor, dizzy. My vision blurred and sharpened again, like a faulty lens snapping back into focus. I stared at the note, willing it to be a hallucination. But it was real. The ink bled slightly into the drywall. I touched it. Wet. Fresh. I backed away. Something had shifted. Not just in the room, in me. Like the boundaries of reality were bending, and I could feel the folds pressing in. I made it up the stairs, 2 at a time, slammed the bedroom door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I called 911. It rang once. Then the line went silent. Not a dial tone. Just a low, rhythmic breathing. Then my voice again. You're doing better than the last one. Click. I dropped the phone. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I was too far past fear now. Past panic. I curled into the corner of the room, hugging my knees like a child. My skin felt wrong. My thoughts felt secondhand. I kept thinking, what do you mean the last one? How many versions have there been? How long has this been happening? And then something occurred to me. A thought so heavy it felt like it cracked my spine from the inside. What if I was never the original? I must have passed out on the bedroom floor at some point because I woke up to sunlight warming the back of my neck. For a moment, I thought I was dead. I didn't move, didn't speak, just let the morning light soak into me like a drug. The silence felt different. Lighter. Not empty, just quiet. Like the house was finally breathing again. Like it had survived the storm with me. I opened my eyes. The note was gone from the wall. So was the magnet. So was the scent, the plastic, the electricity, all of it. I stumbled downstairs expecting disaster, but instead, I found Tessa in the kitchen, hair messy, wearing one of my old t-shirts. She was making coffee, humming. Her face was soft. She looked more like herself than she had in months. Maybe years. She turned and smiled like nothing happened. You passed out, she said gently. I didn't want to wake you. I figured you needed it. I just stood there, speechless, suspicious. my heart still tight in my chest. Where did you go last night? I finally asked, my voice rough. She looked confused for a moment. Then she said, nowhere. I stayed here. I was with you. You were panicking, talking to the walls. You locked yourself in the bedroom and started screaming about another version of yourself. She stepped closer. Sylas, are you okay? My throat clenched. You didn't hear anything? I asked. No voice outside. Nothing at the door? She shook her head. No, just you. I didn't know what to believe. Was it possible it was all in my head? The knock, the message, the drawing on the wall. Was it a psychotic break? A dream? Or was that exactly what he wanted me to think? But then, the more I stared at her, the calmer I felt. The light in the kitchen was warm. The air smelled like cinnamon and coffee beans. And slowly, something inside me, something that had been twisted for a long time, began to loosen. Tessa poured me a cup and slid it across the counter. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. Not anymore. Whatever happens next, we face it together. For once, I believed her. We sat in silence for a long time, just sipping coffee. No music, no phones, just breathing in the moment like we hadn't done in years. Later that afternoon, I packed up every photo, every envelope, and every haunting trace of Caleb. I drove out to the lake, the one where we used to go before everything fell apart, and I burned it all. Not out of fear, but as a ritual, a burial. Let the ashes feed the wind. A week passed. Then two. The calls stopped. The nightmares faded. I started going for walks again, eating real food, laughing. One morning, I found Tessa outside in the garden, her hands in the dirt, humming some song from her childhood. I sat down next to her and said, you know what I think? She raised an eyebrow. What? I think maybe we were supposed to break, just so we could rebuild right. She smiled and took my hand, fingers dirty, skin real. No more voices. No more watchers. Just us. And for the first time in a very long time. That was enough.